In this tutorial video, I'm going to show you how to use custom-sized boxed regions as input to the particle classifier. This feature is useful for analyzing conformational properties of the protein DNA complexes, such as these proteins on this piece of DNA. The conformational properties can be, for example, the bending angle, how much the protein bends the DNA. The idea behind it is to use custom-sized boxes around the proteins and use the data inside the boxes as input to the particle classifier. Note that what's being used is only the masked regions here in red in these boxes as our input, not the whole area. So in that way, we reduce the noises for our input. So we are only using the masks areas. Here I am going to give you a walkthrough on how this is done. So in this demo figure, I have the DNA already masked, and there are a few parameters that you need to take note of. And the first is the mask threshold that masks the DNA. And right now, this threshold is 2.7, it's 0.27 nanometer. So let me just put that into my note. So I'm going to use this later. And now, after that is done, I need to identify the proteins. The protein is usually taller than the DNA. As you can see, if I hover my mouse over the DNA, on the bottom left corner of the window, on the status bar, you can see its position information, which is X, Y, and Z. The X right now is 235 nanometer, the Y is 186 nanometer, and the Z is 0.73 nanometer. This is on the DNA, right? If I move my mouse over the protein, now you have the Z as 1.5 nanometer. So the protein is usually taller than the DNA. So we can use the height information to separate the proteins from the DNA. And right now I can input a number, let's say 1.2 nanometer. And now we identify the proteins, right? The DNA are not masked, but only the proteins are. And sometimes we still have a bit of the DNA, like here, that's masked. And in this case, we can specify an even higher threshold so that only the proteins are masked. Let's say give it an even higher. So there you go. So we have the proteins masked, but the DNAs are not, right? So after we have the protein masked, and we don't need the whole proteins to be masked, we only need part of it to be masked because we are only using the mask as a reference point to make our boxes, right? So we need to expand this mask later on to make those boxes. So the mask's size right now is not important, but we just need to have some part of the protein that's masked, but not the DNA, because that's noise. So right now I have the proteins, or 3 of them, masked in some way. If you cannot see them clearly, I can turn off the colorful mask. I can see that, yes, all three of them are masked. At least some part of them are masked. So then what we do, we need to specify the size of our box. To understand what's the size of the box in pixels, right? And that's the program takes, is the size of the box in pixels. So to do that, you can draw a box around the protein DNA complex. And as you draw the box, you can see on the bottom left corner on the status bar, you can see the information of the box, which includes x, y, width, and height and area. So we want the width and height information of the box. That's the size of the box. Since the program can only takes and only use the size for us to create a square box. So we use the same number for width and height. Right now, I think we can use 25 for our size of the box. Yes, let's use 25. So let's write down here 25 as our box size. Okay, so after that is taken care of, we then can analyze the proteins. Click Analyze here. Okay, so we have 4 particles analyzed. One of them is in the bottom corner and the edge. Right. So once the particles are analyzed, we can then do the correlation analysis, which is used for aligning the particles and also used for the particle classifier. So we'll click the particle correlation here. And now this is where we can use the information we just taken notes of. Right? So now the first thing you do is to pick up the particle source. And because we're using a custom sized box, you pick this option, particle analysis with manual crop size. And the manual crop size, which is box size in pixels, we just say is 25, right? We just take notes of that. And then we also take notes of the height information that we use to mask the DNA, because we want to mask not just the protein but also the DNA. So we need to use a mask that corresponds to that. Now this mask is the one that we initially take notes of. We enter this number here into the mask threshold. That's the number we use to mask the DNA as well as the protein. So once that's done, we can click OK. Now it's doing the correlation analysis using the custom sized box we created. Right? We cannot see the box here, but the program create these boxes and the back end and use those the masked area right above this threshold, right, inside those boxes to calculate the correlation stuff, right? So once that's calculated, right, we can then send our analyzed particles into the particle classifier. Now we are inside the particle classifier. You can see our 4 particles are displayed and also aligned. And you can see the first 2 particles, and these particles are sorted by their correlation to the template, which is the first image that's found by the program. Okay? So you can see that the first 2 particles are well matched. They have the same conformation with the same band angles. Right? The later 2 particles, they're not as similar as the first two. So the program already separates these particles well into at least two conformations. One is the band state, like the first two, and an unband state, like the third particle, right? The fourth one is the one that's bound in the edge, so we can discard that. So one thing to take note of these using this approach is we cannot see the boxed region around that we chose for our correlation analysis. That's one limitation in this approach. So if you try to see this mask better, and you can see only the particles that we masked earlier are shown here, right? Not the box that we created. But that's not an issue as long as the actual data that's used for the correlation analysis is the boxes, right? So we're not using these masks like that's shown here as for our correlation analysis. We are actually using the boxed area within that box, the mask area within that box, right? It's just not shown. The box is just not shown. That's one limitation here. And now all these particles that's the parameters that's shown in this table is for the masks. So it's just this tiny little box. So they're not very useful, right? So this is only useful for doing the correlation, but not for analyzing other stuff like it's not useful for getting information from the parameters of the particles. So that's the limitation for using a custom sized box as input to the particle classifier. So yeah, all right, that's for all for this video. Using custom sized box region as input for the particle classifier. Thanks for watching.